Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. And I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be back with you live for another journey through the news and headlines of our time, guided by common sense. We're going to roll up our sleeves and solve problems neighbor to neighbor, not going to rely on toxic groupthink coming out of D.C. and the New York media, the L.A. garbage media. We're tired of it. They divide us. They send us into a state of stupidity. We don't have time for that. When you're dealing with people who have serious mental affliction, sometimes the best thing to do is not to argue with someone who's in a state of hysteria, a state of mania, but rather find solutions to help heal the situation if possible. And that's what this program's all about. And of course, the big story going on right now in world affairs, people are saying that there's been Russian missiles that have hit Poland, so supposedly on accident. Different reports coming out. I had one source tell me that they're hearing it's debris from a rocket or cruise missile shot down by Ukrainians. Some saying remains are S-300 parts, a Soviet-era air defense system used by Ukraine. Others in the media are trying to use this as an opportunity to create a conflict. There are people, remember, all of the folks that have a vicious love of war are heralded by your media. All of the same media outlets that lied to you about the origins of this pandemic, they lied to you and told you you're racist if you think about it being a lab leak. They lied to you when you said that the whole 6 feet apart gimmick was stupid. They lied to you when you said the lockdowns aren't working. They said absolutely they do, and you're a monster if you ever think otherwise. They lied when they told you inflation was just a minor thing. It's just a myth. It will go away. They lied to you about early treatment and generic drugs, public domain drugs helping you. They lied to you about remdesivir. They lied to you about sunlight and how you need to stay in the house and stay away from sunlight, stay away from anything. They lied to you about omega-6 vegetable seed oils being the healthiest thing you can consume when the scientific data shows that's what creates a lot of the severe cases of this last pandemic. They lie about every single thing that matters, and now they're the same media outlets that are in unison telling you that we need to do more to enable the proxy war in Ukraine. And they had this FTX weird thing pop up out of nowhere, funneled a bunch of money to these warmongering candidates, blasted out any new voices joining Congress. And if I'm wrong, I think there's only a few, maybe Anna Paulina Luna. She's been on this program a few times, and she has signaled opposition to continuing any kind of proxy war with Russia through Ukraine. We'll have to have her on again now that she's won her seat in Congress to see what she's saying, right? Now that she's been elected. I hope it's consistent with what she said before on this program. But almost every single person that you can imagine who would have been an effective opponent of the warfare machine, which is a $1 trillion a year plus scam meant to debase the currency, meant to sell out our military for anti-American interests, meant to play God, meant to make a lot of people rich, pretending to play God. Those folks want conflict with Russia. They want to keep the proxy war going in Ukraine for years and years and years. They want to do to Ukraine what Afghanistan was to them, a endless thing with 20 years of sending money in guerrilla warfare. They want that, but this time Russia would play the role of America. That's their view. And they're all going to tell you aggressive stuff, including folks on the right who are supposedly America first. That's the problem. It's not about America first. It's about what's actually true, what's actually constitutional. So if you're truly America first, you wouldn't make exceptions. Jack Posobiec tweeted out, if this was a deliberate attack on the sovereign territory of Poland, it must be repaid in blood. Now, I thought that MAGA movement is supposed to be anti-war, but that sounds a lot like Hannity Jr. to me. I've had Jack Posobiec on the program before, and I see him in most of the posts I've seen being a critic of war. We don't need to have warmongering pop up as soon as a news story flashes from media outlets that have been reliably misinforming the public about everything that matters for decades, okay? Martyr Maid, Daryl Cooper, who is the host of the Martyr Maid podcast, responded to Jack Posobiec's tweet saying, to hell with that. We bombed the Chinese embassy in Serbia. Poland allows its territory to be used for weapons transfers, training Ukrainian soldiers, flying surveillance missions in support of Ukrainian operations. They are not victims, and we are not starting World War III over those lunatics. So you see, that is the problem of our time, is that people they say they're anti-war, they say they're sensible foreign policy, America first, until the media hysteria hits home. I don't agree with calling people lunatics. I think we should be careful, but if you are, for folks, I think he's not saying all Polish people in here. He's saying people in Poland who seem to want to start World War III with Russia, okay? But there's always this bloodlust for war. There's always this, and this is an insane existential threat that we should be opposing with all our strength. The reason why the conservative movement is not winning more in a time of absolute chaos, with crime going through the roof, with inflation going through the roof, with gas prices and food prices, with insanity being taught to kids. How do you lose to a team that's all about genital mutilation? For God's sake, for children, how do you lose to that team? But of course, there's, you could talk about trickery and shenanigans and the ballot harvesting gimmicks. Those are all valid things to talk about. But fundamentally, why is it so hard to beat an insane team? It's because conservatives don't stand for anything deeply, truly, 100%. The McWoke left stands for something deeply, truly, 100%, and that is nihilism, and they embrace it. And they stand for victimology. They stand for control and totalitarianism. They love this stuff. They want to shut down your speech, and they get votes doing it. Every day we hear a new story about a new program. Department of Homeland Security was doing all this stuff, controlling social media, and the public yawns. And I don't know if that's a sign of how much the public, in the general, casual, normal folks who are not paying attention to principles and policies and history, I don't know if that's because they have a soft affection for totalitarian style moves, and they like that power play stuff. That's what some conservatives take from that. But I think perhaps it may be partly that the public sees in the conservative movement, in all of its factions, a weak, pathetic ripoff of what the left is, without the power to do it. You know what I mean? The left wants to criminalize every kind of nonviolent thing you can imagine. The right says, well, we'll do it even stronger. The left says we will censor our opponents, or we'll use the strong arm of the state to put people in prison that we don't like. And the right says, well, you wait till we do it. We're going to get you back. So when you're faced with someone who's got it all and is flexing versus someone who's not got it all and says, one of these days I'm going to show you, and they flex, and the right flexes, and it's a tiny little bicep, the instinct of the average herd member is going to go towards, well, I think I'm going to stick, if we got too totalitarian, attitudes, right, who are shameless and not telling the full truth in just different ways, I'm going to stick with the one who's got all the power and all the traditional control of all the institutions. Sounds like a safer, more steady bet. This team looks like the upstart rip-off wannabe. See? I'm talking about this conservative Inc. desire to, well, you want to fight like the left. We got to fight like the left. We need a Caesar. Okay, if you want a Caesar, what's a Caesar going to do? They're a bunch of little Caesars, $5 little Caesars over there, okay? I don't care what they say. They can say, they can talk all the big talk they want to do. They're a bunch of little Caesars, $5 pizzas. Seed oil riddled little Caesars. In reality, people want strength, but strength doesn't always have to be, well, it in fact isn't ripping off another team who does something right. Let me put it this way. If you got one team that says we're embracing totalitarianism because we are self-righteous people who think that we are gods and we're just going to own that, that's what the left is doing. You don't get to have ICU access if you don't take our decreed medicine. How much more authoritarian, thuggish can you get? We're going to brainwash children to get them to take hormones that cause cancer because that shows they're down with the cause. That's authoritarian, thuggish imposition. And for the right to just basically learn, well, we're going to do all that too one day. You just wait when we get our little Caesars in there. Okay, the public's going to say, okay, I got two totalitarians. One's actually doing it. One's actually had the machine going. They've got the movies. They got the music. They got everything going. I just stick with what this is. This sounds a little bit more normal. I don't know what they're going to do. You know what I'm saying? So if you're dealing with that, the answer is not to double down on imitating the bad villains in power. The answer is to truly give a different alternative vision. And the only vision that works, the only vision that will crumble wicked empires the way it should be done is the personhood revolution of Jesus. That means a total different approach to things. Not saying, we must be repaid in blood, okay? That's showing you that you're not really imitating Jesus when you talk like that, okay? I'm not saying someone's not a person of faith or whatever, but that is not imitating Jesus, and that spirit is imbued in different parts of conservative movement. For President Trump to say in many of his speeches we should have a death penalty for drug dealers, he's imitating cultures like China. He's imitating cultures like the Philippines, which are not as saturated with gospel considerations and gospel subversion of power and violence. So he's trying to roll back history in a way that can't be done in the West because we are thoroughly infected with gospel considerations. We don't have the appetite for that. We don't have the appetite. You know, Donald Trump isn't saying that seriously. He might mean that at some level, maybe, but he seems to be using that as red meat to stoke a crowd to say, hey, let's go back to public executions of anybody that sells drugs. But Mr. Trump, what happens when it's your government that's been pushing the drugs along with all the other administrations? Oh, no, what are you going to do about that? You see, don't kill the messenger. Like Gary Webb, remember? You see, that's the problem with this facade. It's stupid and it's paper thin. The CIA pumped crack cocaine into inner cities all over this country. It's a fact. So yes, you can talk about, I think there is something if you can prove that a government like China is flooding fentanyl into your border, right? That you should use defensive force of the governance that we have to stop that, right? Because obviously if you're flooding in a toxic substance and it's hitting kids with all this false labeling and all this stuff going on and killing kids, then that's an act of a foreign power, a government, using weaknesses in a system to kill innocent people. That should be stopped. But the idea of going to a drug, doing executions for people who sell drugs, what does that mean? A marijuana guy that's selling drugs, he should be murdered? That's not Christian. Jesus says, do not resist evil with violence. I'll stick with Jesus, not Trump Tower, okay? You call me crazy, but I'm going to stick with the guy who changed the world history, not a guy who maybe got some things right, but is also just, another politician at this point. That's the problem, folks, is that we always want the shiny new toy rather than the real deal. We don't want to step up and be adults and actually work out problems the way Jesus would do. We want to take these little shortcuts to heaven that lead to hell on earth. And everything I see from the people who want to use the government as their little bludgeon to go after their opponents and all that, if you're just imitating that, the public is going to say you're just a weak, rip-off, cheap imitation. I'll stick with what we've got. And that's why they keep voting for the same people who are brazenly, censoring their opponents, brazenly going after and shutting out people off of social media, cutting people off of hosting, cutting people off of sharing their films, cutting people off of television. The public keeps going along with it. Even if you do accept the argument that people on the right are saying that some of these things are rigged, right? If you're doing that kind of brazen authoritarianism, that should be a clean sweep that goes 60-40 or 70-30 against the authoritarians, right? But that's not happening. It's still close neck and neck to the point where you can do little tricks and stuff to put someone over the edge. It shouldn't be neck and neck. If we had liberty on tap, true Jesus imitating liberty, if we actually had that presented by figures in the political domain with integrity, with joy, with glee, with confidence, I do think that would be something that would be attractive for people in a way that we've never seen before. But people are afraid to be as bold as Jesus. They don't want to imitate Jesus. They want to make him an object that they can put in their pocket and say they've attained a certain social status. And because of that, our culture flounders, where we have to be neck and neck with trying to oppose people who want to force genital mutilation on little children. For God's sake, what in the hell are we doing? Everything you see the left do that works and sticks is because they are more effectively imitating the vision revealed to us in the Bible. And you might say, oh my goodness, how could you say that? It's absolutely 100% a fact. The Bible is filled with a story unlike anything in the world, in which it positions history from the vantage point of those who have been oppressed and marginalized and victimized. And every time the right says, well, no, we need to have blood, repaid blood, we need to execute a drug dealer. Whenever you do that, you're speaking a voice in opposition to Jesus Christ. And what the left does is they take that victim concern that Christianity and the Bible gives us in our culture, and they then weaponize it, and they then bring it into a kind of bludgeon for political power. But they do so well, and they're so effective because their aesthetic is biblically infused. Whereas the right says, rah, if the Roman soldier tells you jump, you say how high. Okay, I understand strategically why that's a wise thing to do. Right? You don't want to cause scandal. You don't want to cause violence. You don't want to be disrespectful. But if that's your main aesthetic, when the Roman soldier says, give me your papers, you say, yes, sir. If that's all you've got, which is what MAGA and Conservatism Inc. tends to end up doing, looking like bootlickers for the state, when it comes down to it, no wonder you get your clocks cleaned, because the people running the state are doing it, the authoritarian stuff, much more better, much more long-term. They've been doing it for decades. Woodrow Wilson created the income tax in 1913, the Federal Reserve, same time. That's the system that we're under today. That's the system that keeps us enslaved to debt. That's the system that fuels the establishment. The CIA's been creating chaos around the world for decades and decades and decades. The FBI asked Martin Luther King Jr., has been attacking political dissidents for a long time. Anybody that makes peace, anybody that promotes healing between, the races and so forth, those are the people that our systems of institutional power are most aligned against. That's why they wouldn't even renounce when Ron Paul was winning the polls and straw polls and even actual polls in the Republican primary. They wouldn't even announce his results on Fox News. So why would you expect Fox News to tell you the full truth about anything, including war and taxes and inflation and all that? You've got a few outliers like Tucker Carlson. And now I guess Tulsi Gabbard, she's apparently picked up a contract to be an on-air talent at Fox News. But there really isn't a real distinctive choice. And I have to tell you, the MAGA movement, by and large, is dramatically better than the neocon Bush-era Republicanism, okay? After I've just done some criticism, but at the end of the day, it's infinitely better than the neocon thing. But still, when that's your standard, I mean, that's like, saying that you beat a corpse in a marathon race. It's the neocon project is diabolically, ridiculously, cartoonishly evil, right? And so this new conservative MAGA upsurge thing has some good things to it. But fundamentally, if it's still trying to just imitate the left and say, well, let me get all that centralized power and we'll get back at them, the people are just going to say, well, you look like a little mouse, and I'll stick with the lion that we already have because it's been running for decades and decades and decades. They may not think that, the average voter or a normal casual observer, but they feel that. And feelings are everything in the political world. That's why I tell you, folks, don't bank your hopes on politics, because it is theater. Theater that drives passions and feelings.